In this video, I want to share with you 5 things that might surprise you about therapy. And this is coming from a qualified counselor. So the first of these things is that the issues you want to focus on may not be what you need to focus on. So what I mean by that is like you might be experiencing, anxiety, stress, depression, and there might be a clear reason why that's happening. And so you go to therapy talking about those things in order to try and understand it and feel better. But as you talk about it, there may be other things that come up, or perhaps even things you're avoiding talking about, which is where the root cause of the issue might lie. So this is where you start talking about one thing, but you end up talking about something else, because in fact, it is the very other thing that is causing most of your distress. So what you think you might need to talk about may well, in fact, be what you need to talk about. But certainly in my experience, in most cases, it's usually something else, something that the clients have put aside or perhaps avoided talking about because it's even more painful or difficult to process. And that's why counseling is so helpful, because you think you know what the problem is, but the reality is the problem is something completely different. So having a safe space where you are heard, not interrupted, not judged, those things will more naturally and easily come to the surface so that you can feel even more positive than you were before. The second thing that might surprise you is that you may feel worse before you feel better. So this kind of links back to what I was just talking about, is you go to counseling and therapy to feel better. And indeed, most clients indeed do feel better. But along that way, you may feel worse. Because as you're talking about these issues, as they're coming to the surface, you're bringing with it all the baggage, all the emotional baggage and the extra stress and anxiety that comes with it that you're not sure of, but you just find yourself talking about it. And because you're talking about it, you're bringing it into consciousness. And the reason it's difficult is because you may not have the answer to the problems you're talking about, yet you are talking about it. It's on the table and you have to find a way through it. So in that sense, it can be a very burdensome process. It can feel very heavy and a difficult process, and you may feel worse, but you will feel better with time, and with a supportive counselor, you will find the answer to these questions and the issues that you're experiencing. The third point is that online counseling can be as effective as in-person counseling. There was speculation in the field about whether online counseling can ever be the same as seeing a counselor in person, and evidence has now shown that it is as effective. So if you are not sure about the method or way that you want to have counseling, whether that's in person or should I do it online or by telephone, the truth is that you will be getting as much of a benefit if you do it online as you would if you were seeing the counselor in the same room with you. The positive thing about that is that with online counseling, there's more limited costs than seeing a counselor in person, because you have to rent the room, the counselor has to rent the room, so there's those costs, there's the travel costs. It's just not as convenient as online. There's always going to be a market for people who would prefer face-to-face counseling, and there's always a market for people who prefer online counseling. And the good news is that since the pandemic, there's been a huge resurgence of people and counselors who are offering their services online. So it means that even more people can access therapy. The fourth fact that might surprise you is that therapists don't give advice. We don't give advice because we don't need to give advice. You already have the answers within you. Depending on what problems you're experiencing, that might be quite difficult to hear. You may not believe me, but I've seen time and again with clients, they come distressed and they leave enlightened. They leave light and they know what to do. They know what path to take because it was in them all along. But with the stress of daily life, depression that interferes, anxiety, that all clouds up one's judgment, and it makes it seem like you don't know what you're talking about, and that we therefore need advice from a therapist. And of course, we will occasionally give advice or recommendations, but we don't need to, because you have the answer. And if you think about it, if you went to a therapist for advice and they gave you advice and then you applied that advice and it worked out for you, whose success is that? Was that from you or was that from your therapist? And if it's your therapist's success, how's that leave you feeling? And so the point is that you are capable of overcoming the issues that you're experiencing. The challenge is you may not feel you're capable, and feelings are everything. That's what motivates us. And so through therapy, through the process of therapy, through even feeling a bit worse than you currently are, you can overcome those difficulties and realize that you have the resilience and the wisdom to manage the difficulties that you're currently experiencing. And the final fact that might surprise you is that in therapy, the effectiveness of the therapy comes because of the relationship you have with your therapist. There's nothing the therapist says. There's no wisdom necessarily that they impart, although that will occasionally happen. It's not about how qualified the therapist is. It's not about how experienced they are. That might be an important consideration when looking for a therapist, is probably how much how many qualifications do they have, how experienced are they. But really the therapy comes down to the relationship you have. You might be talking to the most experienced therapist ever, but if you are not connecting with them, then what are you really getting from the session? A good therapist will be supportive. They will not judge you. You'll feel comfortable and safe around them. You feel that you can open up, and that's the whole point. Because the more you're able to open up and share and feel safe doing so, the better the chances of you getting to the root cause of the problem that you're trying to overcome, and you'll more likely find the solution to the problem you're facing. Well, those are the 5 facts that might have surprised you about counseling. If you are interested in counseling, if you have any questions, feel free to pop a comment and I'll get back to you, and I'll see you in the next video.